Appreciate it, Pastor. And good afternoon to everybody, and hope you're staying awake. I know this time on a typical Sunday, I'm asleep and all that, but I get hyper when I talk about the creation model and all, and I will try and transmit some of that hyperactivity to you, dear folks. And again, I appreciate that you're out here this afternoon. I was born and raised in the Chicagoland area and went to a military academy in Wisconsin. Is that how you pronounce it, Wisconsin? For 3 years when I graduated from high school, and then I went to college in Colorado. Excuse me, I went to college in Nebraska, Hastings, Nebraska, for a disastrous year as a non-believer, and flunked out and then joined the Navy, and then that's where I heard about the wonderful message of Jesus Christ and what he has done for us. And salvation by grace and grace alone. That's a wonderful, wonderful message. So I joined ICR in 1996 and have been with ICR ever since. My wife Jan and I have been blessed with 4 children, 3 girls and a tag-along boy. And my college experience has been exclusively in the state of Colorado, both undergraduate and graduate. Well, let's talk about the oceans this afternoon. I love the oceans, and I think I'm an authority on it because I spent 2 years of my life on the ocean. USS Constellation aircraft carrier, and went all over the South Pacific and up to over to Hong Kong and the Philippines and just everywhere, and got a real appreciation for the ocean and all. Psalm 77 says, "Thy way is in the sea and thy path in the great waters." I love that verse, and it's so true and applicable to the oceans. 330 million cubic miles of ocean covers nearly 75% of this planet. And so, as I like to say, let's start calling this planet water instead of Earth. Earth is only a paltry 25% of the surface of Earth. What about the origin of the ocean? Do you remember I said earlier on today that one of the most controversial books that turned the Western world upside down? Do you remember the title? The Origin of Species. One thing that Darwin never talked about was the origin of the species. Well, it's the same situation here. Let's ask the difficult question about the origin of anything, not only the oceans, but origin of all the animals, origin of people. What was their origination? Where did the ocean come from? That's a very good question, and it's an apropos and applicable question in this whole great debate of creation and evolution. Secular science does not know where the oceans come from. The origin of the water in the oceans is unclear, according to the University of New South Wales. The origin, there's that word again, the origin of water on Earth is still puzzling. It's still an enigma, according to 2009, not too awfully long ago. Debate swirls among geologists concerning the rate and timing of ocean origin, that is, ocean formation. According to Eric Chiasson in 2005, Eric Chiasson, very much an evolutionary atheist. I've read some of his material. He is no creation scientist. In his 2007 text, Astronomy, Eric Chiasson and his co-author states that oceans formed when water vapor from volcanic gases condensed. But in their 2011 textbook, the same 2 authors said that the Earth's water arrived, quote, in the form of comets from the outer solar system. Really? Ocean water came from comets? What, cosmic water balloons bombarding the planet? And of course, what's a logical question to ask? Where did they come from with their water? I mean, come on, let's get down to some details. Astronomers looking for clues to water's origins, according to one article way back in the year, well, that's last year, 2014. According to Genesis, however, the earth began as a watery chaos not that long ago, so water was paramount from the beginning. God created the earth with the water, is what we maintain. Evolutionists can speculate endlessly as to the origin of oceanic water, but remember, the Spirit of God moved upon the water, the face of the water. So where did the water come from? From icy comets to Earth's vast oceans, our solar system is chock full of water, they said 5 years ago in a publication, Science, a very, very apropos science publication. Yet so far, no one has been able to demonstrate how it formed in the first place. So as of 5 years ago, they're still pretty much clueless as to the origin of water, As a matter of fact, one evolutionist said in Science magazine, again 5 years ago, Earth's oceans were homegrown. But in this quote 5 years ago in 2010, they said the answer may lie in the dusty interstellar cloud. Well, dusty interstellar clouds are way, way out there. And this other author says, no, the Earth's oceans were homegrown. And they both said that in the same year. So they've narrowed it down to dusty interstellar clouds, or right here on terra firma, or somewhere in between. Icy discovery bolsters the view that asteroids delivered water to Earth. Measurements indicate that one particular comet harbors water ice, supporting the idea that asteroids seeded the Earth's oceans. But ultimately, said the same author 5 years ago, we just don't know. Sky and Telescope said way back in the year 2015, right there, perhaps Earth's oceans were imported after all, not from comets, but predominantly from water-rich asteroids. So you can see from the potpourri of quotes that I've shown you this afternoon that they really don't know where water came from. Dusty interstellar clouds, Earth's oceans were homegrown. No, they were delivered by comets. No, they were delivered by asteroids. Let's go back to the book of Beginnings, written by someone who was there in the beginning. God loves us. He's not the author of confusion. He wants us to know about not only our origin, but also our destiny as well. But I like this quote. This came from a creation scientist just last year. Why doesn't Venus have any water? Venus is almost identical to Earth in size and mass, and even its location is closer to Earth than any other planet. So, wouldn't Venus get hit with just as many comets and asteroids that supposedly contain water that would pepper the Earth over the alleged millions and millions of years, filling our ocean basins? Why is it that Venus looks like this? It is a very hot, sterile place that is water-free, and yet it's been called Earth's evil twin because it has the same orbital characteristics, velocity, and the same distance from the sun. Everything is very much the same, which is why they call it Earth's evil twins, and yet it's water-free. Earth, 72 to 75% water on the surface. Steve Metz is no creationist by any stretch of the imagination. He said back in 2006 that there's any liquid water at all is, he used the M word. Miraculous, what's that a derivative of? Miracle. AT shouldn't use that word. Chemists tell us that the particular strength of the water molecules, hydrogen bonds, etc. But anyway, miraculous is, according to Webster's New World Dictionary, having the nature of, or like a miracle. Hey, you want to see what a drop of seawater looks like? I just got back from La Jolla, California, not 4 days ago. Our oldest daughter was getting married in La Jolla, and I'm a distant swimmer. I think I mentioned that. I love to go swimming. Swallowed a bunch of water. I always do when I go swimming way out there. And this is off the coast of La Jolla. But this is what a drop of seawater looks like, magnified just 25 times. Well, look at this. This looks like Photoshop, but it's an actual living crustacean. It's an embryo. And look at it. Here's a copepod. Here's some other copepods and diatoms and some other things too. So every time you take a slug of seawater, that's what you're drinking. All right. Cheers. Genesis chapter 6 through 8 clearly teaches a flood of worldwide extent. A simple reading of these chapters leads the reader to conclude that God had Noah prepare an ark to withstand a devastating cataclysmic event. How long did it take Mr. Noah to build an ark? 100 years, yeah. 1 century it took him to build an ark, and undoubtedly he probably had friends and neighbors that gave him a hand, even though they didn't believe. They probably gave him a hand in building this very, very strange wooden structure. And how many doors were on the ark, by the way? 1 door in the ark, right? What did people have to do to escape God's wrath and judgment? By faith, they had to what? Walk through the only door on the ark, stepping from God's judgment into God's place of safety, relative peace, and refuge. Isn't that interesting? No wonder the Lord Jesus said in John chapter 10 that he is the door. He's the door. He actually said that in John 10. I personally think he meant that as an analogy to the ark. I can't say that for sure, but that's my conviction. But anyway, it took Mr. Noah a century to build the ark, and then the ark was on the seas for approximately 1 year and landed on Mount Ararat towards the end of the flood year. Indeed, there are at least 30 statements of the universal character of the flood and its effects in the book of beginnings, the book of Genesis. For this they willingly are ignorant of. By the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water, and in the water whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. Here we have a direct New Testament reference to the worldwide nature and extent of the Genesis flood. Is this what the ark looked like? 1,000 times no. No wonder kids who grow up in churches where they say, this is what Mr. Noah's ark looked like, and it's got some nice portholes here, and we can see it's kind of top-heavy with all of the zoo animals that we would see today, and look at that, Mr. Sun is shining and smiling, and oh, there's a few waves in the water, nice clear sky, and no wonder those same students get devastated by liberal theology professors or professors of colleges or universities when they're taught this kind of Sunday school regimen. Let's get back to the basics and understand that Noah's Ark was the size of a World War II escort aircraft carrier. It was formidable. It was big. It had 3 decks. It was seaworthy. And so you know, all the animals are smiling. Mr. and Mrs. Noah are smiling. I mean, this is a time of God's judgment, wasn't it? This is a time of terror. Remember what it says in Psalm 7, verse 11? God is angry with the wicked every day. Every day. So that's what happened. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is, there's that phrase, filled with violence. This same phrase, filled with violence, is found twice in one other verse in Genesis, 2 times in one verse. Through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. So the great flood of Noah's day, we read in the opening chapters of Genesis. Remember that? The creation, corruption, the curse, and catastrophe. Very good. And the catastrophe, the floodgates of heaven. Those are mentioned, and the fountains of the great deep. You know, the fountains of the great deep are mentioned first when it talks about the beginning or the genesis of the Noah's flood. It's the fountains of the great deep that are mentioned first. We think probably that was a time of very, very significant tectonic activity, earthquake activity, such as the world has never seen before. And yes, of course, the floodgates of heaven opened up, and it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. But the flood itself was a little over 1 year. This resulted in the rapid deposition of billions of tons of sediments on a regional scale. And so when we talk about fossils, we say that floods form fossils fast, rapidly. Floods form fossils fast, and the fossil record that we see on every continent of the world is the result of the year-long flood of Noah, as mentioned in Genesis chapter 6 through Genesis chapter 8. Sometimes, this secular author said way back in 2015, something as yet unknown caused sediment to flood the area rapidly. I love this, as yet unknown. You can see the creationists in the back of the room with a white hanky waving it. Going, excuse me, I think I have an answer to that. Something as yet unknown caused sediment to flood the area rapidly, which helped preserve the plants. They're talking about the amazing preservation of plants that are preserved in these layers of sedimentary rock. A researcher splits open a gray slab of siltstone. That's a type of sedimentary rock. Siltstone, sandstone, shales, mud rock, mudstone, in the quarry to reveal amazingly well-preserved Triassic plant fossils, as if the leaves and stems had been freshly pressed into the rock only yesterday. Boy, I'd be in the back of the room with my white hanky going, hey, listen. It wasn't yesterday, but it was only 4,700 years ago, 4,700 years ago. No wonder, ladies and gentlemen, they're finding soft dinosaur tissue. They're finding soft dinosaur tissue now all over the place. It's embarrassing how much soft dinosaur tissue they're finding on all the major continents. A clear indication, not proof, but a clear indication, scientific evidence that the Genesis flood was a recent event and that the dinosaurs did not become extinct, supposedly 65 million years ago. This is a keeper of a quote here, and it was said very recently too, 2015. Yes, this is a clear, again, indication, not a proof, of the recent nature of the Genesis flood. So this geologic timescale that we've all been hit over the head with, both in movies and TV and documentaries and National Geographic and college and high school textbooks, all show essentially the same thing, that this is a record of slow, gradual evolution from quote-unquote simple forms of life over 600 million years from bottom to the top, the present day up here, and giving the formidable names of Precambrian, Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, and all the other things that we had to memorize when I took a course in evolution in graduate school. And yet, it didn't take 600 million years. What's the other explanation for the formation of this geologic column? One is evolution, accumulation of sediments over millions of years. What would the only other explanation be? The Genesis flood. So they say it took 600 million years to lay this down, but we read in Scripture the Genesis flood took approximately 1 year. And now we're finding soft dinosaur tissue here, where there shouldn't be any soft tissue whatsoever. We're also finding all sorts of other very tempting bits of evidence that show the recent nature of these fossils having been laid down. Deep sea vents. Remember, the Scripture says first that the fountains of the great deep burst forth. Well, these deep sea vents are testimony to the geologic upheaval that probably occurred during the Genesis flood. Experts found a vent more than 3 miles beneath the surface of the Caribbean in a deep sea canyon, spewing very, very toxic material such as benzene and its derivatives. That's a cyclic hydrocarbon, very, very toxic, into the ocean. A deep sea volcano disk discovered in 2004 in the Pacific Ocean's northern Marianan Islands has been sending lava and acidic sulfur into the water. Boy, that's not very green. And so there's a lot of pollution going on in the oceans, but there are natural ways that the oceans cleanse themselves, even with the injection of some of these very toxic materials into our oceans. This is the first underwater volcano that geologists have discovered actually erupting. So it's a dyed-in-the-wool volcano. It just happens to be 2.5 miles to 3 miles under the surface of the ocean. Most of the Earth's volcanic activity happens underwater, anywhere from the surface down to depths greater than 2.5 miles. As a matter of fact, the average depth of the ocean is 2.5 miles. That's the average depth. Well, this guy who wrote this, his name is Garrison. Tom Garrison is in Southern California. He is an atheist. He said, however, in just 2 short years ago, however, some recent studies suggested water may have covered the Earth's, what's the word here, class? Entire surface for some 200 million years before the continents emerged. So guess who now is saying that the Earth was covered with water at one time?
Evolutionary atheists. You know, that used to be so unpopular for the evolutionists. But I'll transfer over to my radio voice so you can all hear me. But evolutionary atheists maintain that this planet was never covered with water completely. And now, all of a sudden, we're finding that evolutionary atheists, look at the date there, so 2013, are admitting, yes, this planet was covered with water. Now, folks, that's significant because not only are they saying the Earth is covered with water, but now they're also talking about a worldwide catastrophe. Thank you, Pastor Taylor. You have a servant's heart. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's good. That's wonderful. So not only does the Bible teach about a worldwide catastrophe, right? What is that worldwide catastrophe? The flood, the Genesis flood. Now evolutionists are talking about a giant asteroid, a meteorite, that struck the surface of the Earth just, supposedly 65 million years ago. And
Let me try that. Look at that. All right. So not only do they find that they're talking about a giant asteroid that struck the Earth 65 million years ago. Listen, that was a worldwide catastrophe with a vengeance. And we're also talking about a worldwide catastrophe in the terms of the Genesis flood. But they were laughing at us saying this planet was never covered with water. Now they're saying, yes, the planet was covered with water. We're making headway. So these are exciting. Did I mention that? This are exciting times to be a Bible-believing Christian? Because the evolutionary community is coming up beside us looking at strictly the scientific evidence. They don't believe the Bible. They don't believe the Scripture. They'd just rather not read it and leave it alone. But notice when they do the good science, they're finding out, yes, this planet did suffer a catastrophe worldwide. Yes, this planet was covered with water, just like the Bible says. So critics of a worldwide flood have to take note. This comes from, of all places, the great state of Texas. Yeehaw! Evolutionists admit that this planet could be covered with water, almost. We are talking about a time when, if you were looking at the Earth from space, you would hardly see any land mass at all, said Mike Tice of Texas A&M. He said it would have been almost been an ocean world. Well, I'll take that, leave the almost out. He's talking about this planet being an ocean world. So these are just exciting times to be a Christian and to see the secular community is now agreeing with us. This is taken from a weather satellite out in space. Guess what planet this is? This is Earth, yeah. Do you see why they call it the water planet? It all depends on how the camera is set up as it orbits the Earth here, and you can see in some images, Earth seems to be almost land-free. This is part of the South Pacific. Here's another shot of our planet, and we can see why it's called the water planet. Virtually 3/4 of the surface of the Earth is covered in liquid water. Remember, the average depth of the ocean is 2.5 miles. The ocean depth, well, it varies. It's average 2.5 miles, but in January of 1960, the Tresty, propelled by 2 researchers, went to the bottom of Challenger Deep, more than 3,500 feet down, the deepest spot in the ocean. They were the first humans to experience these depths. Since that time, there's been several other people. A Japanese team went down there, and then also that guy who did those movies, Terminator movies, he went down there alone in a deep sea submersible. The explorers stayed at the bottom for 20 minutes at 1,100 bars of pressure before they began their risky ascent. I love reading about this. This is such an exciting story, and it's true. It's absolutely true. They started going down in the Tresty. They started going down, 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 and about halfway down, the outer porthole cracked. Now, the portholes have to be real small because of so much pressure. I love to scuba dive. I'm certified by NAUI, and I go scuba diving when I have a chance, but you always go with a buddy, for obvious reasons, because you need somebody to hold on to and scream when you get scared. But anyway, as you go down deeper and deeper, the face mask begins to push against your face. You find it's harder to breathe because all the pressure of the water. We take for granted breathing here, but you get that pressure on your chest, and you have to work at breathing. This is just 50 feet down. Of course, you've got to clear your ears as well. It's very dark. It's very cold. If you're claustrophobic, forget about scuba diving, at least any appreciable depth. But they were going down there, and there was a double pane porthole, and they're small, as I say, and the outer one broke. It cracked. So they stopped. Great idea. And they were in communication with the guys up on the ship above them, and they kind of debated whether they should go or not, and they go, let's go ahead and go. And they finished going down the very bottom with a cracked outer porthole. Okay. Matthew Fontaine Murray is one of my heroes of the faith, not only because he's a Navy man, he was in the Navy, but also he was a strong Christian. And he was in a catastrophic carriage accident that caused him to convalesce for months at a naval hospital. And he was reading in Psalm 8 about the paths of the sea. And he decided, if the psalmist is saying there are paths in the sea, as a Navy man, I'm going to find those paths in the sea. And he started writing to his friends who were ship's captains. And they began to do a work which resulted in finding some of the major currents of the oceans that we have today. And they even put a statue of Matthew Fontaine Murray out on the East Coast. They call him the Pathfinder of the Seas. Ocean currents can flow for thousands of miles, and together they create the great flow of a global conveyor belt, which plays a dominant part in determining the climate in many of the Earth's regions. Folks, the reason why we have weather patterns today is because of oceanic currents. Oceanic currents. The reason why we have oceanic currents is the moon. The moon, right? Remember, the moon forms the tides, and we have how many tides per 24 hours? 2. We got 2 tides every 24 hours. The moon helps to attract the waters in such a way that the waters move hundreds of billions of tons of water twice a day, every day. Movement of water to help the nutrient cycling, to help keep this great heat sink called the oceans from not getting too hot or too cold. It really is a marvelously designed sequence of events that not only keeps the oceans at the temperature they're always pretty much found at, but also to give us, little things like rain, precipitation. And it's all due to the moon. You know, somebody asked me a question about what is some of the greatest evidences for creation. At the top of my list, the moon. The moon. The moon. There's so many things about the moon, folks, that is unbelievably precise. Its rotational velocity, its distance from the Earth, distance from the sun, its mass, its trajectory, everything about the moon is exquisitely, exquisitely precise. As a matter of fact, 2 secular researchers back in 2003, I believe, wrote a book, and they are secular. They made fun of creationists in this book. But the title of the book was, Who Built the Moon? They didn't say what built the moon, they personified it. They said, who built the moon? Because the moon is so exquisitely designed. And the arguments they give are just fantastic. But they don't address the Bible because they don't believe the Bible is true. Hey, do you know they found insects on the moon? That's kind of neat. They found insects on the moon? Yeah, scientists are calling them lunatics. So we got these critical habitable zones that are so important for us to live in freely in the environment that we have here on Earth. So far, we've narrowed these habitable zones to galactic, circumstellar, continuously habitable zone, temporal habitable zone. There it is, the tidal habitable zone, chemical and thermodynamic. And this is only one slide. I got 3 more slides like this, listing other traits, other characteristics that have to be precise for organic life to live and breathe and metabolize on this planet. So this is just one slide of 3. It's amazing. So our ocean is pretty amazing. It accounts for 90% of the living space on this planet, and Scripture does say that God created the oceans. Remember, Paul had that debate with the Epicureans and the Stoics and the humanists in the book of Acts. By the way, I think Paul was right. Because what Paul did in those chapters, Acts 14 and Acts 17, Paul took these individuals, these unbelievers, these naturalists. Paul was a supernaturalist. These were naturalists. What did Paul do? He didn't try and debate with them. He just took them back to Genesis. He took them back to the beginning. Look what he said here. That you should turn from these vanities unto, look at these 3 words, the living God. Not a living God, not a God. He said the, in other words, one and only, living, he's not a statue made of stone or wood, God, which made, look at this, heaven and earth, look in gold there, and the sea and all things that are therein. Yeah, go Paul. So this is great. Here Paul is giving an apologia, an apologetic for God having created everything. How much do we really know about the oceans? Remember, they cover 75% of the planet. It's been estimated that oceanographers know only 3% of what lies beneath the waves. If you have a young person you know, it's in your family, maybe a child, a grandchild, a great-grandchild, and they're wondering, what can I do when I go to college or university? Point them to the ocean. They only have 97% more to go. And so, in regard to the Antarctic depths, Stacy Kim said 5 years ago, we have no idea what's going on down there. No idea. Excuse me. It's because, again, the depths of the ocean are so inhospitable. Cold and dark, and it's not toxic, but it's cold and dark, and the pressure is unbelievable the deeper you go. Although it covers vast expanses of the earth, the floor of the deep sea has been mapped less than the surface of Mars. In other words, we know more about the surface of Mars than we know about the bottom of the ocean. because it's so easy to look at Mars. You just send an orbiter up there, take some pictures, make an analysis of the pictures of your leisure, and you pretty much know what Mars looks like. But it's desperately difficult to do that to the bottom of the ocean. More than 90% of the ocean biosphere is deep, and most of this remains unexplored. The ocean hosts life at all depths and across the widest range of conditions. It's unbelievable the animals that can live in these very, very inhospitable areas of the ocean. And they represent a huge reservoir of undiscovered biodiversity, it was said 5 years ago. What is that? I don't know, it reminds me of Fuzzy's taco, you know. But it's strange, but that's actually a living creature. And this is even stranger. These are living creatures. They took a deep sea scoop and scooped up a bunch of material at the bottom of the ocean. This is over 2 miles down. And inside the scoop, they found this guy, and he was not happy. And he was fat, dumb, and happy down there, and he got scooped up, you know. So no wonder he's sad. We've seen only 1% of Monterey Bay, and it's still one of the most well-studied regions of Earth in deep water. This researcher by the name of Lonnie Ludston said, "I can look out over the waters of Monterey Bay Aquarium and imagine thousands of species out there yet to be discovered." And this is just right off the coast of California, where you've got all sorts of oceanic researchers just chafing the bit to get out there and search. What is that? Well, they're calling that a carnivorous harp sponge. Even in your most wildest imagination, you couldn't imagine something like that that's not only out there in the bottom of the ocean, but it's alive. So this thing, whatever it is, it's a living creature that God has created. Wow, look at that. This is a round-nosed grenadier. I looked at that and I thought, I've seen that thing somewhere before. I have seen that. And I started racking my little brain. Where have I? Oh, I remember where I saw that. It's a trap. Anyway, that's what I think they. How about amazing discoveries beneath the waves? Well, the world's highest mountains are found where? At the bottom of the ocean. The deepest valleys. You can have the highest mountains there in the ocean. You're going to also necessarily find the deepest valleys. Underwater lakes? That's redundant. But yeah, they found underwater lakes. How come you got lakes of water? That's strange. But it all has to do with pressure, temperature, and salinity. In other words, the saline content of the waters. If the waters have a different concentration of salt and a different temperature, they naturally separate out. And so you can have actual underwater lakes. And I can prove it to you by going to YouTube and type in underwater lakes, and you can read all about it and see all about it. Underwater waterfalls, well, yeah, they got them off the coast of South America and Antarctica. So actual waterfalls underwater, again, the difference of the salinity and the temperature would cause these different waters to naturally separate out. And so here's some cascading dense water coming from one area into the other, and all of this is happening underwater. And then this is underwater here, and this is an actual underwater waterfall that's coming down, and it's all underwater. So it's just kind of neat, just looking at the oceans. Well, God has not only provided food in the oceans in Psalm 104. O Lord, how manifold are thy works. In wisdom hast thou made them all. The earth is full of thy riches. And certainly that's true in the oceans, which are 75% of the earth. So is this great and wide sea wherein are things creeping, innumerable, both small and great beasts. Diatomaceous earth, as a zoologist, I know a little bit about this because diatoms are actually a type of algae. And diatoms are marine algae with fancy silicate, which is glass pillboxes, full of little grooves and holes. And we look at that. This is an electron micrograph, and it's been given false colorization so we can appreciate what it looks like. Now, my point in showing you this diatom here Do you see those tiny holes? See how small they are? We don't have any machinery on this planet that can make holes as precise and as small and close together as that. We don't have the technology to do that. Yeah, we can send a man to the moon and back again and all. But this, you have to appreciate how tiny this is. You have to use an electron microscope to see it. And those holes are extremely, extremely precise. This great and wide sea, as we read in Psalm 104, wherein things creeping innumerable. Half of a diatom fistule is seen here, the cell wall of a silicate shell. This is a cylindrical oceanic diatom. It looks like the air cleaner of my lawnmower. But again, these are submicroscopic. You need to use an electron microscope to see these and get an appreciation for just the incredible makeup here. They use diatoms, diatomaceous earth, for purifying water, for making dynamite, and also for toothpaste. So there's all sorts of uses for this diatomaceous earth. Invertebrates are animals without a backbone. Vast majority of creatures in the seas are those without a backbone, including the corals and the sea slugs and worms, brachiopods, jellies, sea stars. This is a sea star, it's not a starfish. Zoologists kind of cringe when you say starfish. There's no such thing as a starfish. They're all sea stars. They're all sea stars. So purge that from your vocabulary, starfish, and replace it with sea star. And arthropods. I love arthropods. I'm a parasitologist. I study parasites, and a lot of parasites are spread by arthropod vectors. Like what spreads malaria? Mosquito, right. A mosquito spreads malaria, and that's a mosquito is an arthropod. It's the largest group of animals on Earth. And how about the crustaceans? The delicious crabs and even more delicious lobsters. I love it. This is why I love zoology so much. The most familiar of the arthropods are lobsters and crabs, which belong to the group called the crustaceans. So, what was their origin? Where did they come from? Evolutionists don't know. Two secular evolutionists said 5 years ago of a highly speculative interpretation of arthropod phylogeny or arthropod evolution. But what do we say as creationists? Arthropods have always been arthropods, which means crustaceans have always been crustaceans. Crabs and lobsters were created as lobsters and crabs. How about the giant sea scorpion? Folks, we can, in your devotions, you can thank the Lord that giant sea scorpions are extinct. We know for some time that the fossil record yields monster millipedes, said this evolutionist, supersized scorpions, colossal cockroaches, and jumbo dragonflies that have almost a 3-foot wingspan in what we call the pre-flood world. But he said, we never realized until now just how big some of these ancient, creepy crawlies were. 9-foot giant sea scorpion. They've actually found fossils of this. Can you imagine going swimming and one of these things comes up to tickle your feet? Tickle, tickle. Some species grew to 9 foot long, said the New York State conservationist 2 years ago. The largest arthropods ever. And so this is not some science friction type thing. This actually is a real deal. 9 foot long giant sea scorpion. This is Bathonius giganticus. This was just recently discovered in the deeps, and it is alive. This guy was alive here. Here's a photographer who is taking the picture of it. And look at these savage claws here. This is real savage claws. This is just the anterior, the front part of it. Here it is living in the ocean. It's very, very savage. And this other one was caught here. He's holding it upside down. But again, the claw was right there. He wasn't watching what he was doing as he was taking the picture. And when he turned away, he got his finger close. And boom! Oh, boy, I tell you what. Just about nailed him in the end of the finger. Is that what we call in Texas? We call this a what? A finger? Yeah, okay, right. But he was able to escape without getting... Did some of you wake up? How about an 11-inch crustacean found 4 miles down by British researchers off of New Zealand back in 2002? Look at this thing. This is almost a foot-long crustacean. Boy, that's shrimp with a vengeance. And so this guy wearing blue gloves is holding it. But it was found 4 miles down. And remember, you go 50 feet down, and it's spooky. Imagine going down for 4 miles. Japanese spider crab. This is not Photoshop. This is not, this is actual, the real picture. It can reach a leg span of 13 feet. It can weigh over 40 pounds, the Japanese spider crab. It lives on the bottom of the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Oregon and Japan. That's why they call it the... I love this next quote. I got this, the source of all ultimate information, that is Wikipedia. And they said it has a gentle disposition and can be raised in an aquarium. I would say it has a gentle disposition and be raised in a really big aquarium, okay? Hey, it's a 40-pound arthropod, 40 pounds. When I looked at that, folks, and read it was 40 pounds, I thought as a zoologist of two things, just two things. Lots of butter and lemon. So that's really neat, isn't it? And really delicious. Shrimp have always been shrimp. Just like lobsters have always been lobsters, crabs have always been crabs. PhysOrg shows a picture of a fossil shrimp found in Oklahoma right next to a living shrimp. They're basically identical. God created shrimp as shrimp. We believe by faith this was killed by the Genesis flood and preserved in Genesis flood sediments and is just like the shrimp of today. And the article even said it was buried rapidly. Yeah. What do we say? Floods form fossils fast. Floods form fossils fast. The living Jurassic shrimp was recently discovered alive and well in the Coral Sea. Evolutionists thought the shrimp was extinct for 50 million years. No, it's not surprising at all if you understand that God judged this planet with the flood just approximately 4,700 years ago. But our emphasis is it is just the same as the living, delicious, cold, succulent, melt in your mouth shrimp today. I cannot look at that and not think of cocktail sauce. West Coast sea nettle. I love jellyfish. Not that they're delicious, but they are so unbelievably sophisticated and complex. What percentage of a jellyfish is water? It's just us here this afternoon. Very good. A gentleman said 95, off by 1%. It's 96%. So jellyfish are 96% water, and we think, evolutionists think they're simple. Listen, if it's alive, it's complex. Okay, you can't name a single living creature that isn't complex. They're all complex. But jellyfish are extremely complex, and Dennis Pate, who's no creationist, said the most creative guy in the world couldn't have come up with that. And he's talking about this West Coast sea nettle in an aquarium in Nebraska there. They are very sophisticated. As a matter of fact, they have eyes. Well, that's kind of strange because jellyfish don't have a central nervous system. They don't have a brain or a spinal cord. What are they doing with eyes? But they're designed with light sense organs called ocelli that help them to migrate. And they've also found box jellyfish. They're shaped like a box. See how easy science is? And shaped like a box. They're kind of square. And that's unique because squares in nature are very, very rare. There are some square bacteria that look like microscopic saltine crackers. And so finding squares in nature, living creatures like bacteria or jellyfish is quite rare. But these box jellyfish in the Indian Ocean have not one, but two different sets of eyes. One set of eyes are very much like vertebrate eyes. Vertebrate, that is animals with a backbone. What are jellyfish doing with two different sets of eyes in the same individual? That's a challenge not for creationists, but boy, is that a challenge for evolution to try and explain that. Well, sharks have always been sharks, okay? Sharks have always been sharks. This guy named Dr. John Long, by the way, he's going to be in Dallas next week. I hope to meet him. I'm going to attend the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology. I'm a member, yay! And so they're having their meeting in Dallas, and so I'm going to go there as a gadfly and ask some embarrassing questions, mostly having to do with origins. Just, hey, where did these come from? Tell me, where did this come from? Help me in my unbelief. Where did these come from? And John Long, he was an evolutionary atheist, said the mystery remains as to how sharks first evolved. Why? Because when you go to the fossil record, you find sharks have always been sharks. See, sharks have always been sharks. And the fossil record shows that sharks have been sharks, and they haven't turned into another kind of animal. They didn't evolve from some other animal. They have always been sharks as God has created them. What about shark evolution? Nope. 850 species of shark range from the 49-foot whale shark. It's a docile shark God may have used to swallow Jonah. I personally think this is probably what swallowed Jonah. But God could have created a fish from nothing in order to swallow Jonah. We won't know for sure this side of heaven, but certainly this is a docile creature, and it could easily swallow a man. It's just a suggestion, nothing more. God may have used Jonah to, transport Jonah to the 1-foot dwarf shark, and of course other sharks, including the great white shark, or maybe the pretty good white shark. Darwinists insist that sharks evolved from non-shark ancestors in the ancient past, but conflicting interpretations of the rule. That quote in tan gold there is from an evolutionary publication. Again, conflicting interpretations are the rule. Meanwhile, the creationist simply maintains God created sharks as sharks. I am a scuba diver. I love to go diving when I have the chance. But one thing we are constantly on the lookout for is sharks. But most importantly, the cat shark. Cat sharks are absolutely savage. Watch out for the cat shark. Okay. Seahorses. Boy, do you know seahorse is a fish? Yeah, it's an actual fish. For scientists, the seahorse is an engineering inspiration. Researchers at the University of California, San Diego, that's where I took biochemistry, by the way, are trying to apply seahorse design to the development of man-made tools like robotic arms for use in engineering and medicine. The oldest seahorse fossils discovered to date have been uncovered. This is National Geographic back in 2009. Guess what? Seahorses have always been seahorses. So they're finding these seahorses fossils, and to no one's surprise, especially not the creationist, they're 100% seahorses. Pipefish and seahorses are different. Evolutionists like to say seahorses evolved from the pipefish, but we still have pipefish today. And they are different. The seahorse has bones, not scales, and they swim upright. The pipefish does not. So, and seahorses are very inquisitive too. They're kind of like to look at things. And it's the male that takes care of the young. There's all sorts of weird things about seahorses. Octopus has always been an octopus. They discovered specimens just like the modern octopus that are entombed in rock. Now that's kind of strange, because how many bones does an octopus have? Goose egg, 0, nada. And yet they're finding fossil imprints of octopus that are very much like octopus today. How can you get an octopus fossil? How can you get a jellyfish fossil? They've been finding jellyfish fossils. They're 96% water. And yet the jellyfish fossils are so well preserved that we can identify them right down to the genus level. That's very specific. That means, well, it reminds me of a saying that we have in creation. How does it go again? Floods form fossils fast. So that you have the rapid formation of these fossils that would preserve the octopus, that would preserve the jellyfish in situ, I mean almost immediately. And so they're finding that jellyfish have always been jellyfish, and that the octopus have always been the octopus. Almost indistinguishable from living species, said one researcher. And so here's the actual imprint of the the octopus fossil, and it looks very much like the octopus today. Octopus have a wonderful combination of intelligence, tremendous manipulative ability. Researchers like to do this. They'll take a mason jar and they'll take a blue crab, that's a species of crab, and they'll put the living blue crab inside the mason jar and tighten that thing down. Just tighten it down and then throw it in the water, and the mason jar with the blue crab begins to sink, and it's grabbed by an octopus before it hits the bottom. And the octopus, quick as anything, will unscrew that mason jar, reach in there, and grab that crab and eat it up. Because the octopus loves crab, especially blue crab. That's a delicacy. That's way up there on the list for the octopus. Curiosity and strength, said one researcher at Canada's University of Lethbridge, who has studied cognition, and cognition has everything to do with knowing and perceiving. Octopus only last about 3 years in the laboratory before they die. Not surprisingly, which of the octopus, male or female, are the smartest? Females. Females are the smarter, and they only live about 3 years, but they can remember human faces. So you come back a year later after feeding an octopus and she'll remember you. They can make that association. It's an invertebrate. It doesn't have a brain or spinal cord, and yet it has this amazing cognition. Do you know that they have a sense of humor? Now, I'm not talking about stand-up comedian, you know, but they have a sense of humor. One female octopus was in her tank, and one researcher decided, I wonder what would happen. Now, they love crab and they love shrimp. So the researcher had a shrimp that was beginning to turn. You know that seafood, you know, taken out of its element would begin to rot pretty fast. So this thing was starting to get kind of gross. But all the octopus could see, looking through her tank at the researcher, is holding this shrimp. And by the way, octopus has eyes very much like vertebrate eyes. It's spooky how much an octopus eyes are like ours. It's really strange. And they always favor one arm. How many arms on an octopus? 8 arms. Very good, very good. And so he was holding the shrimp like this. She could see it through the tank. She reached up with her arm and grabbed that shrimp out of his hand. And there's lots of receptors on an octopus arm. All 8 arms have receptors and can measure and receive all sorts of information. As soon as she grabbed it, those receptors could tell something was wrong. By the time she got it in the water, she knew something was definitely wrong about this shrimp. And staring at this guy with her octopus eyes, she took that shrimp and she jammed it into the drain of her tank, as if to say, yeah, real funny. And so she took that shrimp that was turning and just shoved it into her drain there. So the result is everybody who's ever kept octopus has a string of stories about how the octopus can go where they want in aquariums. And that's true also. When they started keeping octopus in aquariums, they would shut down for the night, turn off the lights, close the door, lock it, and go home. They would come back, this is a true story, they would come back to their research facility, and here's what they'd find. They'd find the big tank that had all the invertebrates, like the crabs and the lobsters and the shrimp, would be empty. And then they'd look at the other tank, and there's a couple of octopus there that are looking pretty plump, and they're sitting there with their arms folded, looking back at the researchers going, what? Then they set up these video cameras, and the video cameras would go all night, and found out the octopus would leave their tanks, slither along the floor, crawl up inside the tank and have a smorgasbord, just have a party, and eat all of those invertebrates, and then get out of their tank, crawl back, and get into the other tank there. And by the way, octopus are very agile on land. Not that you see them running across the street or something like that, but they are very active going from tidal pool to tidal pool when the tide is out, eating invertebrates along the way. So they are just absolutely amazing creatures. Many octopus show behavior that suggests curiosity, consciousness, and even a sense of humor, said this one researcher. And so we find octopus have very, very unique ways of changing their color through structures in their skin called chromatophores that I'm very interested in as a zoologist. What's this? That's a Mr. Potato Head. One researcher decided to take his child's Mr. Potato Head, and he took it to work. He tossed it in the tank. This one octopus absolutely fell in love with that Mr. Potato Head and wouldn't let it go, and played with it and all, and finally they had to take it from her to clean it off and all that. She turned bright red. When an octopus turns bright red, they be angry. And he grabbed that Mr. Potato Head and got it cleaned up, threw it back in the tank, and she grabbed it and turned a nice color, whatever their natural color is. But they take the things like that. Well, how are we doing for time? I could go on for another 2 hours. A report released in November of 2009 recorded species living below 656 feet, the point where sunlight ceases. All sorts of very, very unique creatures as we see here. The deep sea was considered a desert until not so long ago. It's quite amazing to have documented close to 20,000 forms of life in a zone that was thought to be barren. The deep sea is the least explored environment on Earth, and it is absolutely awash if I can use that word, with all sorts of living creatures. This is the jeweled anemone crab that God has created. Who knows what this is? But we know it's alive. There's another one. We've seen this a few slides earlier. And oh, yeah, this is one of those deep sea fish. If you look closely, he's got teeth on its tongue. Wow, you'd make a good, I don't know, movie critic or something. But anyway, that's an amazing, amazing deep sea creature. They look very formidable, but they're quite small. Down there, you don't get very large creatures. This is a deep sea fish, sometimes called the black swallower. Let me tell you about the black swallower. This is an incredible creature. Look at those rows of teeth there. They have to eat when they can, and once they eat, they don't care if it's 3 times larger than they are. They must eat to stay alive down there because hot lunch is very few and far between. So the black swallower has been designed by God with a very special mandible here, what we call a mandibular apparatus that can disconnect, much like a snake. And it disconnects so it can swallow this huge fish here. This fish, no doubt, was going to eat this guy, but this guy ate it first. And it's only 3 times larger than the black swallower. And so it grabbed this fish and actually swallowed it. This is the actual membrane of the black swallower's stomach. And it stretches out that far to accommodate whatever meal it wants to eat there. And if this hadn't been caught by the deep sea fishery guys, it would have lived for probably several months on that one meal without having to find something else. Isn't that neat? So I suppose he was pretty upset when they pulled him up, especially after he got that nice meal. This is a marine spider with eggs. Deep sea red jellyfish. This is a USO, unidentified swimming object. A USO. As a matter of fact, these light up. These are actual bioluminescent organs here, and when it gets upset, I don't know how you get it upset. Probably tell it the check didn't clear or something. But anyway, these lights start going out, and an incredible light display. And they know next to nothing about that. And of course, we get just an incredible variety of fish. But I think we're out of time. But fish in all sizes and all shapes, just amazing, amazing fish. They come in a bewildering diversity of shapes. Some gobies reach less than 1 centimeter as adults, whereas the giant oarfish stretches to over 12 meters, and the ocean sunfish can weigh more than a car. And so that's the cowfish there, and there's the sunfish. It can weigh more than a car. So fishes of all sizes and all shapes. I could go on and on. That was just the introduction to the oceans. Then I get in some serious discussion about the oceans there. But God has created just an amazing, amazing environment, aquatic environment that covers 3/4 of our planet. We have the DVD bundle here. It's for $40. You get a host of DVDs, including Jason Lyle's Astronomy Reveals Creation. He is a wonderful speaker. He has his PhD from the University of Colorado in Boulder. He has done lots and lots of work on the sun. He's made some significant discoveries about the sun, and he's working here at ICR. Even the evolutionists have begrudgingly admitted that, yeah, Jason Lyle's research has been quite significant. But these DVDs, these are wonderful to watch and to rewatch and understand the case for creation. This is Creation Basics and Beyond. This is some of the latest research that we've been doing at ICR. If you're interested in creation science and what we've been up to, this is the book to get. Creation Basics and Beyond. It's not illustrated, but it's got a lot of very good articles in regard to creation science as opposed to evolution. If you liked what you saw with Mount St. Helens, this is the book to get, because Dr. John Morris reveals in The Global Flood lots of information regarding Mount St. Helens. So if you saw some of the pictures there in the slides I was showing on Mount St. Helens, a lot of those pictures are in this book. Plus the statistics that I was giving you in the Mount St. Helens talk is also found in this book as well. It's an easy-to-read book. This is by far one of my favorite creation science books, The Global Flood by John Morris. And then John and I wrote this book, The Fossil Record. When I worked at a radio station in Gunnison, Colorado, this was back in the days when they spun those plastic platters on a turntable. What do they call those plastic platters? Records, yeah. And so I would spin those records. People would call me up and say, Frank, would you play the fossil record? That was a joke. fossil record. But I told him, no, we don't play rock music. I tell you, I got a million. I'll be here all day. Anyway, this is a fossil record, and I wrote the last, probably 1/3 of this book, where it's an appendix where I answer the evolutionist accusation that there are missing links. We have found, Frank, many of the missing links. So what I did was I started consulting science textbooks, secular science textbooks, typing in the name of their so-called missing link, and what did I find out? They're not missing links at all. And so I got so interested in it, I told John Morris, and he said, you've got to include what you're discovering in my book I'm writing on the fossil record. So we co-authored this book entitled The Fossil Record, and as I say, about the last 1/3, I just go through missing link after missing link, and as it turns out, they're not missing links at all, according to secular scientists. So that was a lot of fun in that. And then, of course, the best till last is the dinosaur book. We love dinosaurs at ICR. You'll love showing this to your kids and your grandkids. The dinosaur book, it just shows God's incredible creative ability as he created dinosaurs to roam the earth in the pre-flood world and then even into the post-flood world as well, as we read about stories of King George and the dragon in England there. We believe dragons were dinosaurs. You know, I cannot prove it scientifically, but the evidence I think is pretty compelling. Not to mention the dragons found in China. They were probably dinosaurs as well. So you can read all about it here. Folks, you've been a wonderful, wonderful audience. I appreciate so much your attention and all. I'm going to turn this over to Pastor Taylor, and thank you again.